The streets of Lisbon, Portugal, are known worldwide for their breathtaking hills, vibrant architecture, and iconic yellow trams and funiculars that climb impossibly steep slopes. For generations, these funiculars have not only been a means of transportation but also a living symbol of Portugal's cultural identity and charm. Tourists from around the world flock to the capital city to experience the ride, snapping photos of the historic trams as they rumble up cobbled streets against the backdrop of pastel-colored houses, tiled facades, and views of the Tagus River. But on what should have been just another normal day in this timeless city, tragedy struck, shaking Lisbon, Portugal, and the world beyond. A catastrophic accident occurred when one of these world-famous funiculars derailed violently and crashed into a nearby building, leaving 15 people dead and 18 more injured, some critically. The shocking derailment has not only devastated families and communities but has also ignited urgent conversations about safety, infrastructure, and accountability in a nation proud of its tourism-dependent identity. This story is one of grief, shock, unanswered questions, and the painful lessons societies face when beloved symbols turn into scenes of disaster. Eyewitnesses described the scene as something out of a nightmare. The funicular, carrying a mix of locals and tourists, was making its routine climb up a steep incline when suddenly, a deafening sound of metal grinding against stone erupted. Passengers later recalled a terrifying jolt that threw people against the sides of the carriage. Within seconds, the funicular lurched off its tracks, sliding uncontrollably. Unable to stop, the historic tramcar crashed with immense force into a corner building. Dust and debris filled the narrow street as the sound of shattering glass, collapsing plaster, and desperate screams echoed through the neighborhood. Residents rushed from their homes, horrified at the sight of twisted metal, splintered wood, and injured bodies trapped inside what had once been a picturesque ride. Firefighters, police, and emergency medical crews swarmed the scene within minutes, struggling in the cramped alleyways to extract victims from the wreckage. The chaotic rescue operation unfolded under the anxious eyes of bystanders, tourists, and media crews, who quickly realized this was no ordinary accident but one of the deadliest incidents in Lisbon's recent memory. Among the victims were families who had boarded the funicular for what they thought would be a joyful ride, tourists who had flown thousands of miles to tick this experience off their bucket list, and locals who had taken the ride countless times before. Many of the dead were trapped under crushed sections of the carriage, while others succumbed to severe injuries before rescuers could reach them. Survivors described the moments of terror inside, with some thrown violently from their seats and others desperately trying to shield children as the carriage veered out of control. The injured, numbering at least 18, were rushed to Lisbon hospitals with a range of conditions: broken bones, head trauma, lacerations, and psychological shock. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize critical cases, while Portugal's National Health Service activated emergency protocols to deal with the sudden influx of casualties. Outside the hospitals, distraught relatives gathered, clinging to hope and bracing for news that could change their lives forever. Portugal's Prime Minister and President quickly addressed the nation, expressing sorrow and solidarity with the victims and their families. Declaring it a day of mourning, government officials vowed a full investigation into the accident, promising accountability and transparency. Candlelight vigils sprang up across Lisbon as citizens brought flowers, photographs, and candles to the crash site, transforming the narrow street into a place of mourning and remembrance. The tragedy resonated deeply with the Portuguese people because these funiculars are more than just transportation. They are symbols of Lisbon's heritage, landmarks that have appeared on postcards, paintings, and films for over a century. To see one associated with such horror felt like a wound to the nation's soul. Investigators immediately launched inquiries into how such a catastrophic derailment could have happened in a system that has operated for more than 100 years. Early reports pointed to potential mechanical failures, including worn-out braking systems or structural weaknesses in the tracks. There were also questions about whether the funicular had been properly maintained and inspected, particularly given its heavy daily usage by tourists. Portugal, like many European countries, faces the challenge of balancing preservation of historic infrastructure with modern safety standards. Experts noted that while the funiculars have cultural and nostalgic value, modernization efforts have often lagged due to budget constraints, bureaucratic delays, or fears of altering the historic character. Now, after this disaster, those debates have turned into urgent demands for reform. The tourism industry, which plays a massive role in Portugal's economy, has been dealt a heavy blow. Tourists who once lined up eagerly to ride the funiculars are now wary, and global news coverage of the crash has cast a shadow over Lisbon's image as a safe and charming destination. Local businesses near the crash site, many of them restaurants, cafes, and souvenir shops, suddenly found themselves in the middle of a disaster zone. Streets were cordoned off, and police restricted access, turning what had been bustling hubs of life into quiet, grief-stricken areas. Owners expressed sorrow not only for the human tragedy but also for the economic devastation that would follow, at least in the short term. Travel agencies worldwide began fielding calls from concerned clients, and international headlines carried chilling images of the crushed funicular, amplifying fears for those considering travel to Lisbon. But beyond the immediate impact, the tragedy has ignited broader conversations about public safety, infrastructure maintenance, and the human cost of neglect. Urban planners and safety experts argue that Lisbon, like many historic cities, faces immense pressure to maintain old systems under the weight of modern usage. Funiculars designed over a century ago were never meant to handle the sheer volume of passengers they see today, especially in an era of mass tourism. Without rigorous upgrades and modern oversight, the risks of catastrophic failure grow. In the aftermath of the crash, the government announced temporary suspension of all funicular operations across Lisbon pending thorough safety inspections. While necessary, the decision left many residents frustrated at losing a vital transportation link and many business owners worried about financial ruin. Yet, few disputed the need for sweeping changes to prevent such horror from ever occurring again. For the families who lost loved ones, no investigation or policy reform can undo the devastating loss. Stories of the victims began to surface in the media, humanizing the tragedy. A young couple from Germany who had come to Lisbon on their honeymoon were among the dead, their dreams of a new life together cut short. A Portuguese grandmother, taking her grandson on the funicular as a family tradition, perished in the crash, while the boy survived with serious injuries. A group of university students from Brazil, visiting Europe for the first time, were also on board. One was killed instantly while others remain hospitalized. These personal stories transformed the death toll from cold statistics into a painful reminder that behind each number lies a shattered family, a grieving community, and futures stolen in an instant. The psychological scars of survivors and witnesses will also last long after the physical wreckage is cleared. Passengers who lived through the derailment described nightmares, panic attacks, and flashbacks to the moment of impact. For many, what was meant to be a joyful memory of Lisbon has become a lifelong trauma. Psychologists and crisis counselors have been deployed to assist not only the survivors but also first responders who faced horrific scenes while rescuing victims. The accident site itself has become a somber place of pilgrimage, with tourists and locals alike pausing to pay their respects, leaving flowers and written messages on the boarded-up building struck by the funicular. The international response has also been significant. Leaders from around the world sent condolences to Portugal, with European Union officials pledging support for safety investigations and offering technical expertise. Travel advisories were updated by several countries, urging citizens to exercise caution when using older transport systems in Portugal until further safety assurances are in place. This global spotlight has placed immense pressure on Portuguese authorities to act swiftly, not only to address the technical failures but also to rebuild international trust in Lisbon as a safe destination. As time passes, the focus will inevitably shift from mourning to accountability. Who is responsible for this catastrophe? Was it a failure of engineering oversight, a lapse in regular maintenance, or deeper systemic negligence? Investigative journalists are already uncovering evidence of budget cuts to public transportation maintenance programs and long-standing complaints from workers about outdated equipment. If these claims prove true, the tragedy could escalate from an accident to a scandal, with potential criminal charges for officials or operators who ignored warnings. Families of victims are already preparing lawsuits, demanding justice not only for their loved ones but also to force systemic change. Yet amidst all this grief and anger, Portugal has also shown resilience. The spirit of community and solidarity has been remarkable, with ordinary citizens donating blood, volunteering food and clothing for victims' families, and organizing memorial services. Artists have begun creating murals and works of remembrance to honor the victims. Religious leaders from multiple faiths have held interfaith prayers, underscoring the shared humanity that transcends nationality or background. Lisbon has endured tragedies before, from earthquakes to fires, and has always risen from the ashes. This time, the challenge is not rebuilding buildings but restoring trust, safety, and the sense of joy that once surrounded the city's beloved funiculars. The funicular crash will go down in history as one of Portugal's darkest days in recent memory. It has reminded the world that symbols of charm and beauty can conceal hidden dangers if oversight lapses. It has forced a reckoning with the need to balance heritage preservation with modernization, tourism promotion with passenger safety, nostalgia with responsibility. And above all, it has left behind grieving families whose lives will never be the same. As investigators work, as politicians debate reforms, as the city tries to heal, the memory of September's tragedy will linger. The sight of twisted metal against Lisbon's pastel streets will haunt the collective memory, a warning of the cost of complacency and the fragility of life. 15 lives have been lost, 18 others injured, countless families broken, and a city shaken to its core. Out of their suffering must come lessons, reforms, and a renewed commitment to safety so that never again will a joyous ride up Lisbon's hills end in such heartbreak. The world is watching, and the victims deserve nothing less than justice, change, and remembrance that honors their memory.